What if the monster at the end of the story was there from the very beginning, whispering the rules of the game into existence? We're diving deep into the Upside Down, looking at the theories that unravel the entire story of Stranger Things. Before we start, we gotta know, Team Steve, Jonathan, or Eddie? Drop it below. Now let's talk about the game that started it all. What if Dungeons and Dragons isn't just a game the kids play in the basement? What if it's not a metaphor, not a coping mechanism, but something far more terrifying? What if it's a rule book, a script that is somehow being made real in the fabric of Hawkins, Indiana? Imagine the game isn't just predicting the future, it's actively creating it. Every roll of the dice, every monster they name, every campaign they design is a seed planted in the fertile, corrupted soil of the Upside Down, just waiting to bloom into a real-world nightmare. This isn't just about kids with overactive imaginations. This theory suggests that the barrier between make-believe and monstrous reality is not just thin, it's non-existent. The kids, in their innocence, might be the unintentional authors of their own destruction, with a malevolent force like Vecna or the Mind Flayer simply listening in and giving their nightmares flesh and blood. It reframes every single D&D session from a fun pastime into a high-stakes act of creation, a terrifying ritual they don't even know they're performing. Here's where it gets really weird, because the evidence for this isn't subtle. It's the foundational pillar of the entire show. Let's rewind to Season 1, Episode 1. We're in Mike Wheeler's basement. The air is thick with the smell of pizza and teenage angst. The set dressing is perfect. Wood-paneled walls, a worn-out couch, and the centerpiece, the D&D table. Mike, as Dungeon Master, sets the scene. He describes a growl from the shadows, the party's path blocked by a terrifying monster. The Demogorgon, he declares. At that moment, it's just a plastic miniature on a hand-drawn map. But the show intentionally cross-cuts this basement scene with Will Byers cycling home, passing by the ominous Hawkins National Laboratory. The growl Mike describes in the game echoes the unseen horror that confronts Will on Mirkwood Road. The party in the game is hunting the Demogorgon. In the real world, the Demogorgon is hunting Will. This isn't just clever parallel editing, it's the show's first and most blatant statement. The game and reality are one and the same. The monster they named in the safety of the basement is the exact monster that appears. It's not that they find a monster and then name it after a D&D creature for convenience. It's that the act of naming it in the game seems to be what summons it, or at least defines its form in their reality. Think about the odds. Of all the infinite, horrifying possibilities for an interdimensional creature, it just happens to be one that perfectly matches a monster from a niche, tabletop, role-playing game. That stretches coincidence to its breaking point. Let's go deeper into that first campaign. In the game, Will's character, Will the Wise, casts a protection spell, but it fails. In the real world, Will runs home, tries to call for help, tries to load a shotgun. His real-world protection spells all fail too. The game predicted the outcome blow for blow. The kids don't realize it at the time, but they're playing out a dress rehearsal for a tragedy. The boundary is so blurred that when Eleven first appears and needs to explain what she saw in the void, what she saw take Will, she doesn't draw it or describe it. She reaches for the game piece, the Demogorgon miniature, and flips the board over to represent the Upside Down. For her, a girl with no social conditioning, the game piece isn't a symbol of the monster, it is the monster. It's the most direct translation of the horror she can offer. Fast forward to Season 2. The threat escalates. The kids are trying to understand the new, larger entity that has Will in its grip. Dustin, the logician of the group, is the one who cracks it. He pores over his D&D monster manual, a book of fiction, a guide to a game. He finds a creature called the Mind Flayer, a being that controls the minds of its victims with a hive mind intelligence, a master of a shadow dimension. He reads the description aloud, and it's not just similar to what's happening to Will, it's a perfect point-by-point diagnosis. The Mind Flayer is a monster from an unknown dimension, he explains. It is so ancient that it is unknown to any knowledge. It enslaves races of other dimensions by taking over their brains using its highly developed psionic powers. Every single detail matches. Again, the show presents this as the kids finding a convenient label. But the theory suggests it's the other way around. The entity existed, a formless shadow in the Upside Down, and it was the kids' own knowledge base, their D&D lore, that gave it a name, a form, and a specific methodology. The Mind Flayer didn't just happen to act like the D&D monster, it began to act like the D&D monster because that's the role it was assigned. It's as if the Upside Down is a canvas, and the kids' collective imagination is the paint. The evil force, whatever it is, just uses the colors they provide. Now let's jump to the most compelling piece of evidence, Vecna. In Season 4, the threat becomes personal, psychological, and deeply tied to the lore of Dungeons & Dragons. The new villain attacks his victims' minds, preys on their trauma, and breaks them from the inside out. When Eddie and Dustin see the signs, where do they turn? Not to a psychology textbook, not to the police, but straight back to the monster manual. Eddie, the new dungeon master, the new keeper of the law, identifies the killer. Vecna, he says, with a chilling reverence. He explains that Vecna is a powerful, undead lich, a spellcaster who was once human. He's a dark wizard who was banished to another dimension. The description of D&D's Vecna is not just a loose fit for Henry Creel, #1, it's his exact biography. A powerful, psionically gifted human who becomes a monster gets banished to another realm by a young, powerful girl. In the lore, it was his own apprentice. In the show, it's 11. And then grows in power, plotting his return. The parallels are staggering. The show even has Vecna lose his left hand and eye in the lore, which fans speculate might be foreshadowing for his final defeat. So, 3 times a major antagonist has appeared, and 3 times its identity and methods have been perfectly, flawlessly predicted by a tabletop game. This is a pattern, it's a rule. The first time is an incident, the second is a coincidence, but the third time is enemy action. The game is not a lens through which they view their reality. It is the blueprint from which their reality is being constructed. It's almost as if the Mind Flayer, or Vecna, being a psionic entity, can tap into the most potent source of creative, fearful energy in Hawkins. A group of nerdy kids playing D&D in a basement. It listens, it learns, and it builds. The corroborating evidence for this theory isn't just in the big monster reveals. It's woven into the very fabric of the show, in subtle clues, visual motifs, and character arcs that seem to slavishly follow D&D archetypes. Let's start with the characters themselves. They aren't just a group of friends. They are, for all intents and purposes, a D&D party, and their real-life actions consistently mirror their chosen character classes. Mike Wheeler is the paladin, the leader who operates on a strict code of loyalty and friendship. His primary motivation is always to protect the party, especially 11. He gives the rousing speeches, he rallies the troops, and his heart is what holds them together. He is the moral compass, just as a paladin should be. Lucas Sinclair is the ranger or the warrior. He's pragmatic, skeptical, and relies on tangible tools and weapons, from his wrist rocket in Season 1 to his more serious gear in later seasons. He's the one who is most grounded in reality, often questioning the more fantastical explanations, acting as the party's scout and frontline defense. Dustin Henderson is the bard, or the artificer. He's the brains, the problem solver, the one who uses knowledge and gadgets to save the day. His intelligence isn't just for show, it's his primary weapon. Whether he's building a sensory deprivation tank, a radio tower to contact Susie, or correctly identifying the monster of the season using his encyclopedic knowledge of the game. His charisma and humor, classic bard traits, also make him the party's diplomat. Will Byers is the cleric or the mage, specifically Will the Wise. He is the sensitive one, the one most deeply connected to the supernatural forces at play. His connection to the upside down, his true sight, functions like a cleric's connection to a deity, in this case a dark, malevolent one. He doesn't fight with fists, he fights with knowledge and premonition. His paintings in Season 4 are literal prophecies, a form of scrying or divination magic. And then there's 11. She is, quite literally, the mage or the sorcerer. Her powers aren't learned, they are innate, a core part of who she is. She is the magical artillery of the party, the one who can turn the tide of battle with a single, powerful spell. The show even visualizes her powers in a way that feels like casting a spell, complete with physical strain and a cost, like a D&D wizard forgetting a spell after they've cast it. Now let's talk about the dice. The dice are more than just props, they are arbiters of fate. In the opening scene, Mike declares that Will's character is in trouble. To escape the Demogorgon, he needs to cast a protection spell. He needs to roll a 13 or higher, Mike says. Will rolls the dice, they scatter, and the number isn't revealed. It's a 7. The spell fails. Moments later, in the real world, Will Byers is taken. The failed roll in the game sealed his real-world fate. Contrast this with Season 4. The Hellfire Club is in the middle of a campaign to defeat Vecna. Erica, as Lady Applejack, needs to land the final blow. It's a seemingly impossible roll. The entire party is down, but she rolls a 20. A critical hit. At that exact moment, the scene cuts to the real world, where Nancy, Steve, and Robin are attacking Vecna's physical form in the Upside Down with Molotov cocktails. They land a critical hit, setting him on fire and forcing him to retreat. The game didn't just mirror the events, the roll of the dice seemed to directly influence the outcome. A natural 20 in the game resulted in a critical hit in reality. This connection is too perfect to be a coincidence. It implies a causal link where the actions and luck within the game's framework are somehow binding on the real world. Let's also consider the visual language. The Upside Down itself, a dark, decaying echo of our world, overgrown with vines and filled with floating spores, is a classic depiction of a shadow plane, or negative material plane, from D&D lore. It's a dark reflection of the prime reality, a place of death and decay. The design of the monsters, too, feels pulled straight from the pages of a monster manual. The Demogorgon's flower-like head, the Mind Flayer's spidery, shadowy form, Vecna's desiccated, vine-covered body, they all feel like an artist's rendering of a D&D creature brought to life. It's as if the dimension itself is conforming to the aesthetics established in the game's sourcebooks. The very logic of their world has been hijacked by the game's rules. So what if it's all true? What are the implications if Dungeons & Dragons is the literal operating system for the horrors in Hawkins? The so what of this theory is staggering and recontextualizes the entire show from a simple horror story into a deeply meta-narrative about creation, fate, and control. Firstly, it changes our understanding of the kids. They are no longer just victims or heroes reacting to a threat. They become unknowing and unwilling gods of their own world. Their imaginations, filtered through the lens of D&D, are the most powerful force in Hawkins. This adds a layer of tragic irony to their struggle. The very game they use to escape the hardships of their real lives, bullying, broken families, social awkwardness, is the very thing that summons even greater horrors into their world. Every campaign they start is a gamble with reality itself. This would mean their greatest weapon isn't Eleven's psionics or Hopper's shotgun, it's their creativity. It could imply that the only way to truly defeat Vecna and the forces of the Upside Down is not to fight them on their terms, but to write a new story. To win, they might have to play one final, epic campaign consciously this time and write their own victory into the fabric of reality. The final battle might not take place on the streets of Hawkins but around the D&D table in the Wheeler's basement. Secondly, it reframes the nature of the villain. The Mind Flayer and Vecna cease to be just interdimensional monsters with their own ancient motivations. Instead, they become parasitic entities, shapeshifters in a conceptual sense. They are defined by what the party fears most, as articulated through the game. The Mind Flayer wasn't necessarily a Mind Flayer until Dustin read that page in the manual. Before that, it might have been a formless, nameless dread. Vecna wasn't a lich until Eddie gave him that name and backstory. This makes the villain far more terrifying. It's a monster that wears the skin of your own imagination. How do you fight an enemy that you yourself are creating? It's a psychological trap. It also implies that the villain has a weakness tied to this. If its form and methods are dictated by the game's law, then its weaknesses must be too. Just as the kids identified Vecna through the monster manual, the key to his defeat might be hidden in the same pages. The law that defines him could also be the law that destroys him. This brings us to the ultimate implication, the question of free will versus determinism. If the game is scripting reality, are any of the characters truly in control of their actions? Are they all just playing out roles assigned to them, the paladin, the mage, the ranger? When Will's protection spell fails with a roll of 7, was he doomed from the start? Or does the player's ingenuity allow them to cheat the dice? This is the central conflict of D&D itself. The dungeon master sets the scene and the rules, but the player's choices determine the outcome. Perhaps the show is a grand-scale version of this. Vecna is the ultimate evil dungeon master, setting up a seemingly unwinnable campaign. But the party, Mike, Will, 11, and the rest, can still win through cleverness, sacrifice, and loyalty. Their love for each other is the one variable the game's cold logic can't account for. The implications would even touch on the final season. If this theory holds, then the ending of the show has been right in front of us the whole time, hidden within the D&D sourcebooks. The way to defeat Vecna, the fate of the characters, the ultimate sacrifice required. It might all be written down in the lore of a campaign they haven't finished yet. The story isn't just about good versus evil, it's about the power of stories themselves and how the fictions we create to understand our world can, in the strange, dark town of Hawkins, become terrifyingly real. We've all come to accept that the Upside Down is a strange and horrifying place. But what if its strangest quality isn't the monsters or the decay, but its relationship with time itself? Nancy's discovery in Season 4 was a bombshell. The Upside Down is frozen in time, stuck permanently on November 6, 1983, the day Will Byers disappeared, and the first major gate was opened. But this theory asks a much more disturbing question. What if it's not just the Upside Down that's broken? What if Hawkins itself, the entire town, is caught in a temporal anomaly, a subtle but inescapable time loop? This isn't about repeating the same day over and over like in Groundhog Day. It's about a town that's fundamentally stuck, cursed to repeat the same patterns of crisis, conflict, and loss, orchestrated by a villain who may exist outside of linear time. The idea is that the massive rift in space-time created by 11 didn't just open a door to another dimension, it shattered the clock in Hawkins, trapping its citizens in a cyclical nightmare where the past is never truly past, and the future is just a rerun of previous horrors. Every victory is temporary, every moment of peace is just the quiet before the same storm returns, slightly mutated but fundamentally unchanged. The most concrete piece of evidence is, of course, Nancy's diary. Let's break down that scene with forensic detail. When Nancy, Robin, Steve, and Eddie get trapped in the Upside Down in Season 4, Nancy instinctively goes to her room to retrieve her guns. They aren't there. She then finds her diary, and the most recent entry is from days ago relative to her timeline. But her room is otherwise a perfect copy, down to the wallpaper and furniture. It's when she finds her school notes and a test prep calendar that the horrifying truth dawns on her. Everything in the upside-down version of her room is exactly as it was on November the 6th, 1983. The clothes in her closet, the posters on her wall, the state of her homework, it's a perfect, decaying snapshot of that single, fateful day. This isn't random. It's a deliberate choice by the dimension itself or the force controlling it. Why that day? Because it was the day of the first major incursion. The day the membrane between worlds was irrevocably punctured. This suggests the Upside Down isn't just a parallel place, it's a recording, an echo of a traumatic event playing on a loop. But the theory posits that this is just the most obvious symptom of a much larger disease. Now let's connect this to the ever-present motif of clocks, specifically the Creel house clock. That clock is more than just a spooky prop. It's the harbinger of Vecna, but it's also a symbol of broken time. Every time Vecna attacks, his victims are mentally transported to a psychic space dominated by this grandfather clock. The clock chimes, its glass shatters, and its hands often spin wildly or are frozen. Vecna doesn't just kill his victims, he breaks their perception of time before he breaks their bodies. He is demonstrating his mastery over it. As Henry Creel, he was obsessed with the black widow spiders in his home, creatures he saw as predators who brought order to a broken and unjust world. He says he learned to make his own rules and restructure the world into something beautiful. What is time if not the ultimate rule, the ultimate structure? By controlling time, by freezing the Upside Down on a specific day, and manipulating his victim's temporal perception, Vecna is imposing his own twisted order on reality. The clock is his symbol of power, the visual representation of his ability to stop, rewind, and shatter the timelines of others. This brings us to the cyclical nature of the show's plot. Think about the structure of each season. Season 1. A gate opens, a monster emerges, Demogorgon, a child is taken, Will, and 11 closes the gate. Season 2. A new gate is influenced by a larger entity, Mind Flayer. Will is possessed, and 11 closes the gate again. Season 3. The Russians reopen the gate, the Mind Flayer builds a physical body, and the gate is closed, this time at great cost. Season 4. The aftermath of the Starcourt battle leads to Vecna's emergence, who creates new microgates, culminating in a massive, four-way gate, tearing Hawkins apart. It's not just a series of escalating events, it's a pattern, a loop. A gate opens, a D&D named monster attacks, the town is threatened, and the party has to find a way to close the wound, only for it to reopen elsewhere in a new, more horrifying way. They aren't just moving forward, they're running in circles on a track that's getting progressively more dangerous. They are trapped in a narrative loop, and each cycle ends with more trauma and higher stakes, but the fundamental structure remains the same. This repetition is a hallmark of a temporal curse, where events are fated to repeat until the core cause of the loop is finally addressed and broken. The corroborating evidence for a time loop in Hawkins is more subtle, found in the show's soundscape, character behaviors, and the very physics of the Upside Down. It's a theory built on atmosphere and recurring patterns that are too consistent to be accidental. Let's start with the music. The most iconic song of the entire series is The Clash's Should I Stay or Should I Go? Jonathan introduces it to Will in a flashback, a memory from a happier time. But what is the song about? It's a song about indecision, about being caught between two choices, a state of paralysis. The very title is a question that implies a repeating dilemma. This song becomes Will's lifeline in the Upside Down. He sings it to himself to stay sane, and Joyce and Jonathan play it to communicate with him across the dimensional barrier. The song that defines the first season, the anthem of their crisis, is literally about being stuck in a loop of uncertainty. This can't be an accident. It's thematic resonance at its finest, using music to hint at the larger temporal prison the characters find themselves in. Then there's the recurring visual of flickering lights. From the very beginning, this is the primary method of communication with the Upside Down. But what are flickering lights visually? They are an on-off pattern, a binary loop. It's a visual representation of a signal breaking down and repeating, struggling to maintain a consistent state. The very language of the Upside Down is cyclical and repetitive. Let's examine the characters' emotional arcs. They, too, are stuck in loops. Hopper is perpetually caught in a loop of grief for his daughter, Sarah. He pushes people away, indulges in self-destructive behavior, finds a reason to be a hero, saving Will, adopting Eleven, and then the cycle of loss and self-recrimination begins again. Joyce is trapped in a loop of protecting her sons. Her entire life becomes a cycle of vigilance, terror, and desperate action to save her family from the same recurring threat. Nancy is caught in a loop between two boys, Jonathan and Steve, a romantic indecision that mirrors the should I stay or should I go theme. These characters aren't just developing, they are revisiting the same core traumas and emotional conflicts season after season. While this is true of much serial storytelling, in Stranger Things it feels more pronounced, more fated, as if an external force is preventing them from ever truly moving on. The past is not just a memory in Hawkins, it's an active, predatory force that constantly pulls them back. Now consider the physics of the Upside Down being frozen in 1983. This has temporal implications that go beyond just a static environment. If time is not flowing there, does that mean that things that die there are not truly gone? We see this with the vegetation. It's decayed, but it's not gone. It's in a state of permanent stasis. This could apply to living creatures as well. It provides a perfect built-in narrative explanation for how a character like Dr. Brenner could survive a Demogorgon attack, or how another, even more significant character might not be as dead as we think. The Upside Down is a place where the rules of life, death, and the passage of time are suspended. This temporal stasis could be the key to understanding Vecna's power. He was banished there in 1979, but the dimension itself became locked onto 1983. This means there's a 4-year gap. What happened in those 4 years? It's possible that Vecna, existing in this timeless void, had an eternity to explore, to grow in power, to shape the dimension to his will. For him, time might be a plaything. While the kids experience time linearly, a few years of crisis, Vecna has potentially had eons from his perspective. He's not just a few steps ahead of them, he's playing a completely different game, one where he can see the beginning, the middle, and the end of the loop he has created. He is the architect of their repeating nightmare. If Hawkins is trapped in a temporal loop, the implications are profound and deeply chilling. It would mean that the character's struggle is not just against a monster, but against destiny itself. Their fight for survival becomes a fight for free will. First, it completely redefines the nature of victory. Closing a gate, killing a monster, these are no longer ultimate wins. They are merely hitting the pause button. If the town is cursed to repeat its trauma, then any victory is, by definition, temporary. The gate will always reopen. A new monster, or perhaps even the same one in a new form, will always emerge. This explains why the threat keeps escalating. It's not just a new chapter, it's the same chapter with the difficulty turned up. The loop is tightening. This raises the terrifying possibility that the characters are doomed. Are they fated to fight and lose, or fight and win a Pyrrhic victory over and over again for eternity? Or is there a way to break the loop? In stories involving time loops, the loop is always broken by identifying the original sin, the event that started the cycle, and correcting it. In this case, the original sin could be one of two things: 11 opening the first gate in 1983, or going back further, Henry Creel's massacre at Hawkins' lab in 1979. To truly win, the party might not need to kill Vecna in the present. They might need to find a way to prevent him from ever starting the cycle in the first place. This opens the door for time travel, or at least a confrontation with the past, not as a memory, but as a tangible place. Perhaps the key to saving Hawkins in 1986 is to change what happened in 1983 or even 1979. Second, it changes our perception of Vecna's power and plan. He's not just a powerful psychic. He is a chronomancer, a master of time. He's not just reacting to the kids' plans, he's anticipated them because he may have already seen them play out before. This makes him a nearly unbeatable foe. How do you surprise an enemy who has already lived through this day 1,000 times? It makes his taunts more meaningful. When he tells his victims it's time, he's being literal. He is the lord of their time. His goal to merge the Upside Down with Hawkins isn't just about conquest, it's about making the loop permanent. He wants to turn his timeless, decaying prison into the new reality for everyone, trapping all of Hawkins in his static, ordered, and dead world. But this also provides his potential weakness. Loop-based villains are often arrogant. They believe they've seen every possibility. The heroes always win by doing something unexpected, something so illogical or self-sacrificing that the villain could never have predicted it. The party's hope lies in their unpredictability, their human irrationality, and their love for one another. The one variable that a cold, nihilistic being like Vecna would always underestimate. The final implication is perhaps the most mind-bending. If the Upside Down is a recording of November 6, 1983, it could be seen as a save file, a snapshot of a world that can be revisited. Could the party use this? Could they intentionally travel into the 1983 version of the Upside Down to gather information, to understand the origin of the threat in its infancy? Could they find a younger version of a character there? Could they find the ghost of Barb? The narrative possibilities are endless and complex. It transforms the Upside Down from just a monster-filled hellscape into a crucial, if terrifying, strategic tool. The entire story becomes a battle for control of the timeline, with Vecna trying to enforce his deterministic, cyclical nightmare, and the kids fighting for a future that is unwritten. We all felt it. The gut punch of watching Eddie Munson, the misunderstood metalhead outcast, go down swinging. He died a hero, distracting the Demobats to buy his friends more time, finally standing his ground instead of running. It was a perfect, tragic end to a brilliant character arc. But this is Stranger Things, and the line between our world and a dark, twisted fantasy world is non-existent. In the world of Dungeons & Dragons, a world that we've established seems to be writing the script for Hawkins, death is often not the end. It's a doorway to something else. So, what if Eddie Munson isn't gone? What if he's coming back, but not as the lovable rogue we knew? What if his death in the Upside Down was not an ending, but a horrific rebirth? This is the theory of Eddie Munson, the Cars, the Bloody-Handed, Vecna's most trusted lieutenant, and his eventual betrayer. The evidence for this theory is a beautiful tapestry of D&D lore, visual symbolism, and narrative foreshadowing. Let's start with the most critical piece of lore, straight from the D&D sourcebooks. Who is Cass? In the lore, Cass was a human vampire who became the most powerful and trusted servant of the lich god Vecna. He was Vecna's right-hand man, his champion. Vecna even crafted a legendary sword and shield for him. But over time the sword, which was sentient, began to corrupt Kaz, whispering to him and turning him against his master. Eventually Kaz betrayed Vecna, leading to a legendary battle that saw Vecna defeated and banished, though Kaz himself was also thrown across the planes of existence. Now let's map this lore onto Eddie Munson's story. Point 1. The nature of his death. Eddie wasn't just killed, he was swarmed and bitten to death by demobats, bats, the quintessential animal associated with vampires. The Duffer brothers could have had him killed by anything in the Upside Down, strangled by vines, mauled by a demogorgon, but they chose bats. This feels like an intentional symbolic choice, planting the seed for a vampiric transformation. Point 2. The shield and the weapon. In his final stand, what does Eddie use? A makeshift spear and a shield fashioned from a trash can lid, painted with a demonic figure. Cass the Bloody-Handed is famous for two things, his sword and his shield. Eddie, in his final moments, takes up the symbolic mantle of a warrior with a shield and a piercing weapon, mirroring Vecna's legendary lieutenant. He is playing the part without even knowing it. Point 3. Master of Puppets. The song choice for his epic distraction is not random. It's Metallica's Master of Puppets, and the lyrics are chillingly relevant. Master of Puppets, I'm pulling your strings, twisting your mind and smashing your dreams. This is a perfect description of what Vecna does to his victims. Eddie plays the role of the puppet master in his performance, luring the bats. The tragic irony is that in death, he could become the puppet, with Vecna pulling his strings. The song isn't just a cool metal anthem, it's a prophecy of his potential fate. Point 4, and this is crucial, his body was left in the Upside Down. In the chaos of the finale, Dustin has to leave him behind. We never see his body recovered. In the world of fiction, the #1 rule is no body, no death. The Upside Down is a place where the rules of nature are broken. We've already theorized that it's a place of temporal stasis, a place where death may not be permanent. What if Vecna, grievously wounded from his fight with Nancy, Steve, and Robin, retreats and finds the body of the boy who thwarted his plans? What better revenge, what better tool than to resurrect him as a monstrous, twisted version of himself? A puppet to send against the friends he died to save. This fits perfectly with Vecna's sadism. He doesn't just want to kill his enemies, he wants to psychologically torture them. Turning their beloved, martyred friend into his vampiric general would be his ultimate act of cruelty, aimed squarely at the heart of the party, and especially at Dustin. Beyond the major D&D lore connections, there's a wealth of subtle, corroborating evidence that suggests Eddie's story isn't over. These are the little details, the narrative loose ends, and the thematic echoes that point towards a dark resurrection. Let's look at the character of Eddie himself. He is the dungeon master of the Hellfire Club, the one who introduces the campaign against Vecna. In a meta sense, he is the storyteller who names the villain. There's a powerful narrative poetry in the storyteller becoming a part of the story in the most horrific way imaginable. He literally gets pulled into his own nightmare. The Duffer Brothers have repeatedly called Season 5 the culmination of all the previous seasons, bringing everything full circle. What would be a more powerful culmination for Eddie's arc? He starts as a pariah, falsely accused of being a satanic murderer in league with the devil. What if he returns as an actual monster, a literal vampire in league with the devil figure of Hawkins? It would be the tragic fulfillment of the town's baseless accusations. He would become the very thing they wrongly condemned him for, a narrative circle closing in the most painful way possible. Now let's analyze the final conversation between Dustin and Eddie's uncle, Wayne Munson. It's one of the most emotional scenes in the entire season. Dustin, through tears, tells Wayne that his nephew died a hero. He gives him Eddie's guitar pick, a symbol of his identity. Dustin makes a vow, I'm going to make sure that people remember him, that they know he fought and died to protect this town. This is a classic narrative setup. It's a promise that hangs in the air. How could this promise be fulfilled or, more tragically, complicated? Imagine the dramatic weight if, in Season 5, Dustin is on a mission to clear Eddie's name, only to be confronted with a monstrous resurrected Eddie. His mission, to make the world see Eddie as a hero, would be in direct conflict with the reality of what Eddie has become. It creates an instant, powerful, and deeply personal conflict for the show's most lovable character. This brings us to Joseph Quinn's own performance and interviews. The actor himself has played coy about a potential return, but he imbued Eddie with such charisma and depth that the character's death felt premature. The fan reaction was immense. arguably greater than for any other secondary character in the show's history. While fan service isn't always good storytelling, the Duffer Brothers are smart writers who understand the power of emotional investment. Bringing Eddie back as Kaz would not be simple fan service. It would be a narratively rich, dramatically devastating twist that uses that fan investment as fuel for the final season's emotional fire. There's also the symbolism of the Upside Down itself. It's a place of corruption. Everything that crosses over from our world becomes twisted and decayed. We see it in the plant life, in the architecture. It stands to reason that this corruption would apply to a human body left there. It wouldn't just rot, it would be transformed, warped by the dimension's malevolent energy into something that serves its master, Vecna. Eddie's resurrection wouldn't be a miracle, it would be a perversion, a natural consequence of dying in that unholy place. He wouldn't be Eddie anymore. He would be a creature of the Upside Down, wearing Eddie's face. The implications of Eddie returning as Kaz are absolutely massive, sending shockwaves through the entire narrative and setting up a final season filled with unbearable emotional stakes. This isn't just about adding another monster to the mix, it's about weaponizing the party's love and grief against them. The primary and most devastating impact would be on Dustin. Dustin Henderson has already lost so much. He saw his friendship with Lucas strained, he saw his mentor figure in Steve get repeatedly beaten, and he watched Eddie die in his arms. Eddie's death was a formative trauma for him. To have Eddie return, not as a friend, but as a servant of the enemy, would be a psychological blow from which he might never recover. It would force him into an impossible position. Could he fight the monster wearing his best friend's face? Could he be the one to put Eddie down for good? This would be his ultimate test, a crucible that could either forge him into the party's greatest leader or break him completely. It's a character conflict of Shakespearean proportions. It's not just about Dustin, though. The entire party would be fractured by this. How would they react? Mike, the paladin, might see it as a black and white issue. That's not Eddie, it's a monster, and it needs to be destroyed. Lucas, the pragmatist, might agree. But someone like Will, who has been possessed and understands what it's like to have your body used by the enemy, might argue for a different approach. He might believe there's a sliver of the real Eddie still inside, fighting to get out. This would create incredible internal conflict, tearing the party apart right when they need to be most united. This twist also elevates Vecna as a villain. It proves he's not just a brute force, he's a master of psychological warfare. It's a move of pure, calculated sadism. He's not just trying to kill them, he's trying to break their spirits. By turning their love into a weapon, he attacks their greatest strength. A resurrected Cass Eddie would be his ultimate trump card, a walking, talking symbol of his power to corrupt everything the heroes hold dear. But here's the most important implication, the one that ties back to the D&D lore. Cass eventually betrays Vecna. This is the glimmer of hope within the tragedy. If Eddie comes back as Kaz, he is destined to be the instrument of Vecna's downfall. His entire arc would be a long, dark journey towards one final, heroic act. Perhaps the real Eddie is buried deep inside the vampiric monster, and in the final moments of the ultimate battle, he is able to regain control for just a second. Maybe he takes a blow meant for Dustin, or maybe he turns his new dark powers against his master, creating the opening the party needs to land the final blow. This would mean that Eddie's sacrifice in Season 4 wasn't his final heroic act, but the first step towards his true destiny. He had to die to become the monster that could get close enough to Vecna to destroy him. His arc would be one of damnation and redemption, a fall from grace that ultimately leads to the salvation of everyone. He would fulfill his destiny as a hero, but in the most twisted, heartbreaking way imaginable. His name would be cleared just as Dustin promised. but the story of how it happened would be a horror story in itself. This theory doesn't cheapen his death, it makes it even more meaningful, turning a tragic ending into a crucial, story-defining chapter in a much larger, darker saga. Of all the characters in Stranger Things, who is the easiest to overlook? It's probably Karen Wheeler. She's the suburban mom, the maker of meatloaf, the one who is perpetually, almost comically, unaware of the cosmic horror unfolding in her own basement. She represents the normalcy that our heroes are trying to protect. But what if that's all a facade? What if her cluelessness is a mask, hiding a past that is directly connected to the central mystery of Hawkins and the Creel family? This theory posits that Karen Wheeler is not a background character. She is a dormant key, and her true identity might be Alice Creel's sister, making her the aunt of Henry Creel, also known as Vecna. The evidence for this theory hinges on a few key pillars: visual similarities, narrative gaps, and strangely prominent placement in a key piece of promotional art. Let's start with the most speculative but tantalizing piece of evidence: the physical resemblance. In the flashbacks to the Creel family, we see Alice Creel, Henry's sister. Casting in a show like Stranger Things is incredibly deliberate. The actress who plays young Alice Creel bears a noticeable resemblance to a younger version of Cara Buono, the actress who plays Karen Wheeler. This could be a coincidence, but in a show this meticulously planned, coincidences are rare. More importantly, it fits a potential timeline. We know the Creel massacre happened in 1959. Karen Wheeler's age is never explicitly stated, but based on her having a teenage daughter in 1983, it's reasonable to assume she was born in the early to mid-1940s. Alice Creel was shown to be a young child in 1959. What if there was another Creel sister, one who was slightly older, perhaps a young teenager, at the time of the massacre? What if she wasn't at the house that day? A sister who, after her family was brutally murdered and her brother slipped into a coma, was sent away, had her name changed, and tried to build a new, normal life to escape the trauma. This would perfectly explain Karen Wheeler's existence and her presence in a town like Hawkins, a place that seems to attract people with hidden pasts. Now let's analyze Karen's behavior, particularly in Season 3. Her main subplot involves a flirtation with Billy Hargrove, who is, at the time, possessed by the Mind Flayer. On the surface, it's a story about a bored housewife tempted by a dangerous young man. But let's look at it through the lens of this theory. Karen is drawn to Billy, but at the last moment she pulls back. In their final poolside conversation, there's a flicker of something more than just guilt in her eyes. It's a look of recognition. Not that she knows Billy, but that she recognizes the darkness in him. Could she, on a subconscious level, sense the same malevolent energy that destroyed her family all those years ago? Her line to Nancy earlier in the series, "You're a fighter, you've always been a fighter," could be seen in a new light. Perhaps she sees in Nancy the strength she wishes she had, the strength to confront the darkness she ran away from. The most compelling piece of official evidence comes from outside the show itself, the main poster for Season 4. The poster is a collage of all the major characters looking up in horror at the Creel house and Vecna. We see Eleven, Mike, Will, Hopper, Joyce, all the key players, and right there among them, given equal prominence, is Karen Wheeler. Why? In Season 4, her role is minimal. She has a few scenes worrying about her kids, but she is not part of the main plot. Why would the promotional art place her in such a central, significant position alongside the main heroes if she was just the clueless mum? This feels like a deliberate hint from the Duffer Brothers, a piece of foreshadowing that tells the audience, pay attention to this character, she is more important than you think. It suggests her connection to the central conflict is real and will become crucial in the final season. Her presence on that poster is an anomaly, and in mystery box storytelling, Anomalies are where the truth is hidden. The corroborating clues are subtle, woven into the background of Karen's character, painting a picture of a woman who might be suppressing a past far more complex than we realize. These clues are found in her conversations, her home, and her strange sense of calm in a town that should be anything but calm. Let's revisit her conversation with Nancy in Season 3 after Karen decides not to go through with meeting Billy. Nancy comes home, upset about being fired from the Hawkins post. Karen tries to connect with her, talking about her own past. She says that her mother had all these grand plans for her, but she fell in love with Ted, and that was that. It's presented as a typical story of a woman giving up her dreams for a family. But the dialogue is laced with a sense of regret and a past that was derailed. What if the grand plans her mother had were not about a career, but about recovering from an unspeakable family tragedy? What if marrying Ted and moving into a quiet suburban life wasn't just settling down, but an active attempt to bury a horrific past under a mountain of mundane normalcy? Her entire life could be a carefully constructed fortress against her own memories. Consider the Wheeler house itself. It's the hub of the entire show. The party was formed in that basement. 11 was hidden in that basement. It's the central point from which the fight against the Upside Down has been waged for years. Why the Wheeler house? What if the reason the events of the show are so centered on Mike and Nancy is not just because they are the protagonists, but because their family has an unspoken ancestral connection to the villain? It would mean that Vecna, in a way, is being drawn back to his last remaining family. It would cast the entire series in a new, deeply ironic light. The battle against Vecna is literally a family affair, and they don't even know it. Then there's Karen's strange lack of panic. Over 4 seasons, Hawkins has been the epicenter of bizarre events. Power outages, strange creatures, a mall burning down, a literal earthquake splitting the town in 2. Most residents are shown to be in a state of growing panic or denial. Karen, however, seems to possess an unusual level of composure. While she worries about her children's safety, she rarely seems to question the fundamental weirdness of what's happening. Is this just the writers sidelining her character, or is it a deliberate choice? Could it be the composure of someone who has seen worse? Someone who, deep down, knows that the world is not as safe and normal as it appears because her own childhood was destroyed by a supernatural evil? Her lack of shock could be a symptom of suppressed trauma, a mind that refuses to connect the dots because the picture they would form is too monstrous to bear. Some fan theories on Reddit have gone even deeper, analyzing the set design of the Wheeler home. They've pointed to small background details like old photographs that are never quite in focus, or pieces of decor that seem slightly out of place for the 1980s, suggesting they could be heirlooms from a past Karen has tried to forget. While this is highly speculative, it fits the pattern of the Duffer Brothers' meticulous world-building. They are known for hiding clues in plain sight. A simple, out-of-place picture frame in the background of a shot could be the key that unlocks Karen Wheeler's entire backstory. If Karen Wheeler is indeed Vecna's aunt, the implications for the final season are game-changing. It would take a character that has been on the periphery for the entire series and rocket her to the absolute center of the story's mythology and its emotional core. First and foremost, it would make the conflict deeply, tragically personal for the Wheeler family. The fight to save the world would also become a fight to save their family from its own cursed legacy. For Mike and Nancy, Vecna would no longer be just a monster terrorizing their town. He would be their cousin. This would add an insane layer of psychological horror to their struggle. Nancy, the investigative journalist, would have to uncover the dark secret at the heart of her own family. Mike, the heart of the party, would discover that the evil they've been fighting is literally in his bloodline. This personal connection could be the key to defeating Vecna. Perhaps there is a memory, a piece of information about Henry Creel that only a family member would know, that has been passed down to Karen subconsciously. Maybe a nursery rhyme, a childhood fear, a secret that she has long forgotten. Unlocking Karen's suppressed memories could become the main quest of the final season. The party would have to find a way to make her remember the trauma she has spent her entire life trying to forget, a dangerous and ethically fraught mission. It could be that Karen holds the key to Vecna's weakness, not a physical weakness, but a psychological one. This also reframes Karen's character arc. She would be forced to transform from a passive bystander into an active participant. Her journey would no longer be about dealing with a midlife crisis. It would be about confronting the monstrous ghost of her past. She would have to become the fighter she sees in Nancy. This would provide a powerful, emotional arc for a character who has been largely comedic or dramatic relief. It would be the ultimate payoff for 4 seasons of her being in the dark. The moment Karen Wheeler finally understands what's going on will be a seismic shift for the entire show. Furthermore, it could explain Vecna's focus. While he attacks people with trauma, his ultimate goal is to reshape the world. But what if there's a personal element to his choice of Hawkins? He's not just attacking a random town. He's attacking the town where his last living relative built a life of ignorant bliss. His war against Hawkins could be a twisted, personal vendetta against the family that got to live a normal life while he festered in the Upside Down. He's not just destroying a town, he's destroying his aunt's sanctuary. This theory doesn't just add a fun twist, it retroactively enriches the entire narrative, making the story smaller and more personal, and therefore more powerful. The fight for the world becomes the story of one broken family and the unsuspecting matriarch who holds the key to either its salvation or its total destruction. Now let's take a step back and look at the beautiful, tangled mess of red string on our detective board. We have 4 distinct theories, each compelling in its own right, but the real magic happens when you start to see how they connect, how they overlap, and reinforce one another. They aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, they might all be different facets of the same terrifying truth. Let's start by connecting the 2 most prominent theories. The D&D game is real, and Eddie Munson as Cass. This connection is the most direct and powerful. The Cass theory is entirely dependent on the D&D theory being true. Cass the Bloody-Handed is not a figure from general mythology. He is a specific, named character from the lore of Dungeons & Dragons. If the kids were just using D&D as a convenient metaphor, then there would be no reason for Eddie to come back as Kaz. He would just be dead. But if the game is literally providing the blueprint for reality, if Vecna is a creature bound by the lore he has been assigned, then the existence of a Cass figure is not just possible, it's almost narratively required. In D&D lore, Vecna does not exist in a vacuum. His story is intrinsically tied to his lieutenant, Cass. For the show to introduce Vecna so faithfully without introducing his legendary betrayer would be like telling the story of King Arthur without mentioning Lancelot or Mordred. It would be an incomplete adaptation. So the D&D is real theory provides the foundational in-universe rule that allows for the Eddie as K's theory to exist. One theory is the how and the other is the what. The game provides the mechanism for a dark resurrection, and Eddie's specific death and character arc provide the perfect candidate for that resurrection. The Demobat bites become the vampiric curse, the Master of Puppets song becomes the prophecy, and his body left in the Upside Down becomes the catalyst. It all clicks together perfectly. The D&D theory explains why a character would be resurrected according to fantasy rules, and the Kaz theory provides the perfect, dramatically devastating candidate. Now let's weave in the Hawkins in a time loop theory. How does this connect to our grand, unified theory? The time loop provides the perfect environment for the other theories to fester and grow. If Hawkins is stuck in a repeating cycle of crisis, it explains why the D&D to reality pipeline keeps working. The characters are forced to turn to the game again and again to understand the new, escalated version of the same threat. The loop ensures that the conditions are always right for them to accidentally write the next chapter of the horror. It's a self-perpetuating nightmare. The time loop also provides the perfect stage for Cass's return. Vecna, being the master of this loop, the one who potentially exists outside of its linear progression, would have all the time in the world to find Eddie's body and begin the slow, horrific process of reanimating him. The static, timeless nature of the Upside Down, a key piece of evidence for the time loop theory, is also the perfect supernatural laboratory for creating a creature like Cass. Time doesn't pass, so the body doesn't decay, it transforms. The loop isn't just a plot device, it's the petri dish in which the D&D-fueled horrors are cultured. The cyclical nature of the plot, gate opens, monster attacks, gate closes, is the narrative rhythm of the loop, and each verse of this horrible song introduces a new D&D concept made real. Let's complete the tapestry by integrating our final, most character-driven theory. Karen Wheeler is a key player. How does the secret identity of the Wheeler matriarch connect with D&D time loops and a resurrected Eddie Munson? At first glance, it seems like the outlier, but it might just be the pin that holds the entire board together. The Karen Wheeler theory provides the why. Why Hawkins? Why the Wheelers? If Karen is Alice Creel's sister, then the original sin that may have started the time loop isn't just 11 opening a gate, it's the Creel family massacre. The entire temporal anomaly that has trapped Hawkins could be centered on the trauma of one family, Vecna's family. Hawkins isn't just a random town, it's the place where Vecna's last living relative, his Aunt Karen, is hiding. The time loop then becomes Vecna's personal obsession, his attempt to constantly replay and eventually correct the events that led to his family's destruction and his own transformation, with his aunt's new family at the epicenter. This connects directly to the D&D is real theory. If the core of the problem is Vecna's family trauma, why does it manifest as D&D monsters? This is where the kids come in. Vecna, a powerful psychic, latches onto the most powerful source of creative and fearful energy in his vicinity, the Wheeler basement. He takes his own personal, formless rage and pain and gives it a shape using the content of the kids' imaginations. The Demogorgon, the Mind Flayer, they are masks that Vecna's trauma wears, masks provided to him by his own unwitting nephew, Mike. This makes the entire situation a dark, twisted family drama playing out on a cosmic scale. The conflict is between two houses, the House of Creel and the House of Wheeler, and the battleground is the shared imagination of the children. And how does this connect to Eddie as Kaz? It makes the choice of Eddie even more sadistic and personal. Eddie is not family. He's an outsider who was brought into the fold by the Wheeler's son and his friends. By resurrecting Eddie as his lieutenant, Vecna is performing a cruel mockery of family and loyalty. He's showing the party, this is what happens to those you embrace. I can take them and make them mine. It's a direct assault on the found family that the party has created, a found family that stands in stark opposition to the biological family Vecna destroyed. So here is the unified theory in all its horrifying glory. The Creel family tragedy involving Karen Wheeler's forgotten past created a psychic wound in Hawkins. This wound, amplified by Eleven's powers, shattered time in the town, creating a repeating loop of crisis, the time loop theory. The villain at the center of this loop, Vecna, a being of immense psychic power but limited imagination, began to shape his attacks based on the D&D games being played by his own extended family and their friends. The D&D is real theory. As the conflict escalates, he will enact his cruelest move yet, resurrecting a fallen hero, Eddie Munson, as his vampiric lieutenant from D&D lore, Cass, to psychologically torture the heroes and exploit the very rules of the game they created. The Eddie as Cass theory. Each theory strengthens the others. They are not competing, they are converging into a single, cohesive narrative that explains the rules of the world, the motivation of the villain, the stakes of the conflict, and the potential tragic destiny of its characters. It's a story about stories, a loop of trauma, and a family secret that has blossomed into a world-ending nightmare. We've journeyed through the looking glass, explored the twisted logic of a game made real, and contemplated the chilling possibility that time itself is broken. We've mourned a fallen hero only to imagine his horrifying return. In the end, all these theories are just that, stories. They are attempts to impose order on the chaos, to find a pattern in the static, just as the kids themselves do with their monster manuals. But maybe the truth of Stranger Things is that it's all of these things at once, a story about how games shape our reality, how time traps us in our past, and how the secrets of one family can poison the world. The narrative isn't just one of these threads, it's the entire tangled tapestry. In the final season, when the chimes of the grandfather clock ring out for the last time and the fate of Hawkins hangs in the balance, which story will prove to be the most powerful? The heroic tale of a paladin and his mage, the tragic ballad of a resurrected puppet, or the forgotten ghost story of a suburban mother? The real question is, in a world where stories can kill, which one will be the one that finally saves them, and which one will be their last?